Whenever you tune in to social media or, business news, do you notice that perpetual fight? It feels like it's always on.
Oh, yeah. It's a constant battle.
You got the central bankers, you've got the gold bugs, and you've got the Bitcoin maxis. And, everyone seems to make a good case from their perspective.
They're all very convincing.
Right. You have Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan calling Bitcoin a virus.
Yeah.
Oh, really? I'm pretty sure that was his word for it, a virus.
He's not a fan, that's for sure.
And then you've got Peter Schiff, the gold guy. He thinks the central bankers are, well, bad, but he thinks Bitcoin is even worse.
Yeah. To him, it's just noise distracting from the real asset.
And then, of course, the Bitcoin maxis, who think gold is just a yellow rock, and that the entire banking lobby is just pushing these dated, failed economic theories.
So you have three camps, all absolutely certain they're right, and all pointing fingers at each other.
Exactly. So the real question for the rest of us is, what is the truth? What are we actually supposed to believe when everyone's yelling?
It creates a tremendous amount of noise, doesn't it? And it's easy to get lost in the personalities. But if we, step back for a moment, what we're seeing isn't just a rivalry between people or different types of assets.
It's deeper than that.
Much deeper. And, just to add to the confusion, you have to throw the nation states into the mix, as if we didn't have enough to worry about.
Right.
We aren't just talking about a simple rivalry between, say, the U.S. and China. The source we're looking at today suggests this is a much more fundamental split. A bifurcation in the very fabric of our economic reality.
A bifurcation. Okay. That's a big word. A split.
A deep split. On one side, we have a system that is fundamentally based on value. Think absolute scarcity, things you can hold, things that can't be created out of thin air.
Okay, value.
And on the other side, a system built entirely on leverage. This is about credit expansion, about IOUs, and about the perpetual deferment of obligations, pushing promises out into the future.
Wow. That sounds
heavy.
A bifurcation in reality.
It is. And it's not a future prediction. The source argues it's happening right now. Think of it like two different operating systems trying to run on the same computer. System 1 is anchored in value. System 2 is completely fueled by leverage.
And they're not compatible.
They're moving in opposite directions.
Okay, so we need to unpack this, because usually when people talk about this, it gets very tribal. You're either on Team Fiat or you're on Team Hard Money. It's very black and white. But you're suggesting this is something more structural.
Precisely. This isn't just some theoretical concept from a textbook. We are seeing it play out in real time, all around us. The rise of Bitcoin, for example, or the fact that central banks are suddenly buying gold again like it's 1960.
Right, I have seen those headlines.
Those are signals of a major shift back towards a value-based system.
Yeah.
But at the exact same time, the existing fiat system is doing the opposite. It's doubling down on leverage. Debt is expanding faster than ever. Financialization is getting more and more complex.
So the two systems are pulling apart.
They're pulling apart.
Yeah.
And I think it is really time to take a more nuanced view of this, to step outside the tribalism and look at it from a nonpartisan perspective based on pragmatic economic theory. Shall we?
We shall. Yeah. Welcome to the Deep Dive. I'm Satosha.
And I'm Satoshi.
But before we jump into the mechanics of these two competing worlds, I have a quick favor to ask you, the listener. We started this show with a simple question. Is there really scope for deep research outside of the formal academic circles? And your response has been just incredible. Prove that you all are just as receptive to new ideas as we are. So first of all, thanks a lot for all the support.
Truly, it's been amazing to watch this community grow and to see the level of conversation in the comments.
It really has. But we do have a specific goal right now. We still need to hit 1,000 subscribers to unlock the funding for the Mosaic AI video editor.
The video component.
Exactly. If you're into video creation at all, you've probably noticed the buzz around Remotion infographics. There are these incredible fluid animations. And Mosaic was probably the first AI-driven video editor tool that fully adopted Remotion infographics into its tiles framework.
It would let us visualize these really complex topics we're talking about.
That's the key. We need this tool to get this content to you in a visual format. We fully understand that audio is a powerful medium. It's perfect for hands-free listening on a drive or on a walk or when you're doing chores. But there are some parts of these deep dives where we just feel like our hands are tied because we are an audio-only show.
Some of these concepts, like the ones we're about to discuss, they almost demand a visual explanation.
They really do. So please, help us unlock the funds. Please just take a second and hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening on YouTube, YouTube Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or even on a value-for-value platform like Fountain.fm.
It really does make a huge difference in what we can produce for you.
Absolutely. And one last thing. For those of you who want to get a bit of a head start on some of the concepts we're discussing today, especially the Bitcoin side of things, we do have our YouTube course on Bitcoin. I'll put the link for that in the description. It's a great primer.
Good call.
But now, let's get into it. The great bifurcation.
Let's do it.
Okay, so the source material we're working from is titled The Bifurcation of Global Economics, the Value Leverage Paradigm. And it kicks off with a pretty bold claim right out of the gate.
It doesn't waste any time.
No. It essentially argues that the world isn't really governed by politics, not by Republicans or Democrats, left or right, but by two fundamental mathematical equations.
That's the core premise. And I think this is where most people, they get tripped up right away. We look at the economy and we see people. We see Jerome Powell at the Fed making a decision or a president signing a bill into law.
We see human agency.
We see human agency. But the source argues that these people are more like actors caught in a much larger mechanical structure. They have roles to play, but the script has already been written by these underlying forces.
So it's not a binary choice between righteous and erroneous. It's not the, Fiat is evil narrative versus the gold is an archaic relic narrative.
Exactly. It tries to move beyond that. It describes the shifts between these systems as mechanical spasms of the economic universe.
Spasms. That makes it sound almost biological, like the economy is having a seizure or something.
In a way it is. Or maybe a better analogy from the source is a heartbeat or breathing. The source suggests that the global economy breathes, it breathes out, and it breathes in.
Expansion and contraction.
Precisely. To understand that breath, we have to look at the two equations that drive it. The source labels them equation A, which is the value equation, and equation B, the leverage equation.
Okay, let's start with equation A. The source literally writes it out as gold plus Bitcoin equals value.
Correct. And this simple-looking equation represents some very deep concepts. It represents absolute scarcity, represents terminal settlement, and it represents what the source calls a centripetal force.
Centripetal force.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a term from physics. That's the force that pulls things inward toward a center, right? Like gravity.
Exactly like gravity, value concentrates. It has a gravitational pull. It pulls energy and capital towards a dense, stable center. It's a force of consolidation.
Okay, so that's the breath in, the pulling inward. Then we have equation B, and this one is even simpler. Fiat equals leverage.
Yes, and this one represents the opposite. It represents credit expansion, an elastic supply of money, and centrifugal force.
The opposite of centripetal, the force that pushes things outward, away from the center. It's an expansionary force.
All right. If you're on a merry-go-round, centripetal force keeps you from flying off. Centrifugal force is that feeling of being thrown outward.
So one system pulls in, the other pushes out. One is like gravity, and the other is, like an explosion.
A controlled expansion. A breath out. The source argues that these aren't just conflicting ideologies that we get to choose between. They are phases. They are cycles.
You can't just inhale forever, and you can't just exhale forever.
You can't. History is essentially the story of civilization moving between these two states. The real problem arises when we get stuck in one phase for too long, or when the transition between them, what the source calls the phase change, happens too violently.
Which brings us to where we are today. It feels like we're on the cusp of one of those phase changes. But before we get to that, I really want to dig into these equations. I feel like we toss around words like value and scarcity and fiat all the time, but we don't always define them mechanically.
Let's do it. It's fundamental to the whole argument.
So let's look at that first equation again. Gold plus Bitcoin equals value. Why are these two specific assets lumped together? They seem so different. One is ancient and physical. The other is brand new and purely digital.
It's a great question, and it's because the source argues you have to look past the surface level and analyze the underlying physics of their existence. Let's start with gold.
Okay.
For, 5,000 years of recorded history, gold hasn't just been a shiny rock we make jewelry out of. It has consistently served as a monetary anchor,
The foundation.
the foundation, and the source highlights a few key properties that allow it to be that anchor. The first one is simple: chemical stability.
Right. It doesn't rust. It doesn't tarnish.
It doesn't corrode. You can bury a gold bar in the mud for 1,000 years. You can sink it to the bottom of the ocean, and when you recover it and wash it off, it is exactly the same. It has physical integrity across time.
That survives.
It survives. But the more important property, the one that really drives economists and central bankers crazy, is the stock-to-flow ratio.
Okay, this is a term I hear thrown around constantly, especially on finance Twitter. Stock to flow. Can we actually unpack this? What does it mean in plain English?
Let's visualize it. Imagine a huge bathtub. The water that's already sitting inside that tub is the stock. That represents all the gold that has ever been mined in all of human history. Every ring, every bar in a vault, every coin, it's all there, sitting in the tub.
Okay, got the tub. It's a big one.
It's a very big tub. Now, imagine the faucet is dripping, just a slow drip, drip, drip. That drip is the flow. That represents all the new gold that we can manage to mine out of the ground this year.
Okay.
For gold, that bathtub is the size of an Olympic swimming pool, and the faucet is just a tiny leaky drip. The amount of existing gold, the stock, is massive compared to the new supply, the flow. In fact, the inflation rate of the gold supply, which is just the flow divided by the stock, is usually around 1.5 to 2% per year, and it's been that way for centuries.
So even if we suddenly discover a huge new gold mine in South Africa, or if the price goes up and everyone starts digging like crazy, the actual water level in that Olympic-sized tub barely rises.
Barely. You can maybe double the flow for a year or two, but it's still just a drop in the bucket. It would take something like 60 or 70 years of mining at current rates just to double the existing stock.
Wow.
This physical constraint is the key. It means the supply cannot be arbitrarily expanded. If a king back in 1500 AD wanted to fund a war, he couldn't just turn up the faucet. He couldn't print more gold. He had to physically go take it from someone else or dig it out of the ground, both of which cost a tremendous amount of energy.
That's a powerful check on power. So this is related to the zero-duration asset concept the source talks about.
It's related, but it's a slightly different point. Zero duration refers to counterparty risk.
Okay, explain that.
Let's say you hold a U.S. Treasury bond. What do you actually hold in your hand or in your brokerage account?
There's a paper. Or, more likely, a digital entry. A line of code somewhere.
You hold a promise. You hold a contract that says the United States government promises to pay you back your principal plus some interest at a future date. The value of that bond depends entirely on the government's ability and its willingness to keep that promise.
So if the government collapses or decides not to pay,
the bond is worthless. It has what we call duration risk and counterparty risk. Its value is dependent on a third party.
But if I hold a 1-ounce gold coin in my hand,
you don't need anyone to promise you anything. The value is intrinsic to the physics of the metal and the 5,000-year history of human consensus. The transaction is terminally settled the very moment you receive it. It's final. No takebacks.
Okay, so that's gold. It's the original gangster of value. Now, the source throws Bitcoin into this exact same equation, gold plus Bitcoin. And this is where, Jamie Dimon calls it a virus, and Warren Buffett famously called it rat poison squared. Yeah, but our source here calls it the digital evolution of gold. How does a string of code equal a physical, time-tested metal?
The source argues that we need to look past the surface-level difference, physical versus digital, and look at the underlying properties. Bitcoin was arguably engineered to solve the inherent problems of gold while retaining and even improving upon its core benefits.
What problems does gold have? I thought the whole point was that it's nearly perfect as money.
As a store of value, it's incredible. But as a medium of exchange, it has issues in the modern world. Gold is heavy, it's physical, it's hard to verify. If I want to pay you $1 million worth of gold and you're in London and I'm in New York, that is a massive logistical nightmare.
You need an armored truck, a plane, a vault, security, insurance.
Exactly. It's incredibly slow and expensive to move. It has high friction. Bitcoin, on the other hand, takes that core stock-to-flow property of gold, the scarcity, and creates it mathematically through its code.
The 21 million cap.
The hard cap of 21 million. We know with mathematical certainty there will only ever be that many. The code dictates it. The issuance schedule is predictable down to the second. It cannot be arbitrarily inflated.
So the tub, in our analogy, has a hard, unbreakable lid on it. You literally cannot add more water than 21 million units.
Exactly. But And this is the evolutionary leap. Because it's purely digital information, it moves at the speed of light for basically no cost. It combines the absolute scarcity of a solid with the velocity and portability of information.
Okay, I see the connection now. So in this value equation, these two assets, one ancient and physical, one modern and digital, they act as the ultimate anchors. They are the breath in. They pull everything back to a reality that you can't just fake by printing more of it.
Correct. And this brings us to the societal impact, which I think is one of the most fascinating points the source makes. It's about something called time preference.
I found this part really interesting. Argues that the type of money we use can actually change our collective personality, our behavior. That feels like a bit of a stretch.
Does it? Let's think through the incentives. In a value-based society, let's say we are on a gold standard or a future Bitcoin standard, the money tends to appreciate in value over time. Or, at the very least, it holds its purchasing power perfectly.
So if I have $100 today, in 10 years, it will buy me the same amount of groceries, or maybe even more groceries, because goods and services get cheaper due to technology.
Exactly. So what does that incentivize you to do with that $100 today?
Keep it. Save it. Don't spend it unless I absolutely have to.
Right. It incentivizes what economists call low time preference. That means you prioritize the future over the present. You delay gratification. You save. You accumulate capital. You build things that are designed to last because you are planning for a future where your wealth is still intact, or even greater.
So that's how you get things like the cathedrals in Europe that took hundreds of years to build, or multi-generational family businesses that are passed down.
You get a society that thinks in decades and centuries, not in fiscal quarters. It fosters patience, durability, and stability. The source calls it the crystalline structure of economics. It's strong and ordered.
It sounds idyllic, it sounds peaceful and stable. Why on earth would we ever choose to leave that system? Why did we invent the other equation?
Because stability has a downside. It can be rigid. It can be stagnant. You can't run a rapid, explosive global industrial expansion on pure scarcity. If you want to build the entire modern world with skyscrapers, internet cables, massive global trade networks, and you want to do it in a single lifetime, you need to find a way to cheat time.
Cheat time.
Enter equation B, fiat equals leverage.
It's a great breath out.
The breath out. And the source defines this very simply. It's currency that derives its value from government decree, from the power of taxation, and from collective trust in that system. Unlike the value equation, this money is created ex nihilo out of nothing.
So it's magic internet money, but from the government instead of a decentralized network.
In a way, yes, and it acts as a multiplier on capital. The source uses the Greek letter lambda to represent this multiplier effect. Now, I know this is the point where the hard money the Bitcoiners and the gold bugs usually start screaming from the rooftops.
Right. They say fiat is theft. It's a Ponzi scheme. It's a way to silently tax the working class through inflation.
And look, they have a point, don't they? If you print more units of money and the amount of goods and services stays the same, my existing units of money are worth less. That's just basic supply and demand.
It's a dilution of my savings.
Mechanically, yes. But our source takes a very pragmatic stance here. It actually makes a case for leverage. It defends it. It argues that leverage is a necessary and even beneficial tool for industrialization.
A necessary evil, or just a necessary tool, period.
More like a necessary tool for a specific phase of development. It provides the expansionary breath that's needed to take big risks and grow quickly.
Right.
The source outlines what it calls the 3 pillars of utility.
Okay.
The first pillar is supporting entrepreneurship.
All right, sell me on this. I'm an entrepreneur with a big idea. Why do I need fiat money?
Okay, let's say you have a brilliant idea for a massive factory that will build electric cars. It's going to cost $100 million to build and equip. Now, in a pure gold standard system, interpreted strictly, you would have to possess that $100 million in gold before you could spend it. You'd have to save it up from the profits of your previous ventures, which could take 30 years.
And by that time, someone else has already invented the car, or the market has changed, or I'm just too old to do it.
Exactly. The innovation dies on the vine because the capital is too slow, too rigid to reach the idea in time. Leverage, via the fiat system, allows a bank to create that $100 million as a loan for you now. You are essentially pulling value from the future, from the profits you hope your factory will make, and using it today. It creates a powerful tailwind for builders and innovators.
Okay, I can definitely see that. It dramatically speeds up the timeline for innovation. What's the second pillar?
The second pillar is promoting consumption. Now, this is where it gets a lot more controversial.
I can imagine.
The constant expansion of the money supply creates demand. It creates a sense of urgency to spend.
Because my money will be worth less next year, so I might as well buy stuff now. It makes people feel richer than they are, so they spend.
Correct. This is the high time preference society. But if you're a manufacturer, you need that demand. If everyone is hoarding their gold because of low time preference, nobody is buying your new washing machine or your new television. Leverage, by encouraging spending, greases the wheels of commerce. It ensures there is a market for all the goods being produced by those new factories.
It creates the consumer culture we live in. And the third pillar.
Enabling commoditization. This is all about making goods incredibly cheap for the masses. To make a smartphone that costs $500 instead of $50,000, you need immense scale. You need robots, fully automated assembly lines, global just-in-time supply chains.
Which costs billions and billions of dollars in upfront investment.
Exactly. You need a huge injection of capital, of leverage, to build the infrastructure that eventually lowers the cost per unit for everyone. The source argues that without the fiat system allowing for this massive upfront borrowing, we would simply not have the incredible abundance of cheap, high-tech goods we all enjoy today.
So the core argument is, yes, fiat dilutes the value of your savings, but in return, it gave you a 70-inch flat-screen TV for $300 and a supercomputer in your pocket for less than $1,000.
That is the fundamental trade-off of the leverage era. You traded the long-term value of your money for the short-term abundance of things your money can buy.
This brings us to a really pivotal moment that the source material focuses on. It's what it calls the paradox of abundance and leads directly to the infamous Nixon shock of 1971.
August 15th, 1971, the day the music changed for the entire global economy.
Usually, this event is painted as the villain origin story in the hard money world. You see all those charts online, WTF happened in 1971, and after that date, wealth inequality skyrockets, real wages stagnate, obesity goes up, divorce rates go up. It gets blamed for basically everything.
It does. And look, the correlation on those charts is undeniable and staggering. But the source asks us to consider the alternative. Why did Nixon actually do it? It wasn't just because he was some power-hungry politician. The source argues he was trying to solve a very real problem: the scarcity trap.
Okay, what is the scarcity trap?
Imagine we had stayed on the gold standard through the 20th century. But technology kept improving at an exponential rate. Tractors get way better, fertilizers are invented, seeds are genetically improved. We get incredibly good at producing a massive abundance of wheat, corn, milk, everything.
Okay, so we have abundance. That's a good
Yeah.
thing, right? No more famines.
It should be. But in a fixed money system, like a gold standard, if the supply of goods doubles and the supply of money stays the same, what happens to the price of all those goods?
The price gets cut in half.
Yeah.
You get massive deflation.
Severe deflation. Now, put yourself in the shoes of a farmer. You took out a loan denominated in gold ounces to buy that fancy new tractor, but now the wheat you're selling is worth half what it was last year. You can't make enough to pay back your loan.
So I go bankrupt.
You go bankrupt, and so does the farmer next to you and the one next to him. You all stop farming. And suddenly, despite having the technology to feed everyone on the planet, the economic incentive to actually do the farming is completely destroyed. This leads to what the source calls a deflationary death spiral.
Wow.
The source argues that if it's not profitable to farm because prices are constantly falling too low, you risk mass hunger in the midst of potential abundance. It's a terrifying paradox.
So the government has to step in to prevent that.
This is what the source calls the governance of abundance. The government has to use leverage subsidies, crop insurance, price floors, all funded by printed money to artificially prop up the farmer. They essentially print the difference to keep the system from seizing up and collapsing.
So when we reevaluate 1971 through this lens, the source is saying Nixon didn't just arbitrarily break the system for personal gain.
The argument is that it was a functional catalyst. By unhinging the dollar from the physical constraint of gold, Nixon freed global liquidity. He essentially made a choice. He said, we are going to prioritize expansion, consumption, and industrial growth over the long-term integrity of the currency. It was the world taking a massive collective breath out.
So it prevented the economic engine from stalling out and going into a deflationary spiral, but it also put us on this road to what seems like infinite debt.
Precisely. It solved the deflation problem of the 20th century, but in doing so, it created the inflation and inequality problem of the 21st.
Speaking of inequality, we absolutely have to talk about the allocators, The source has a section on what it calls functional bifurcation, and it's a re-examination of the Cantillon effect.
Yes, this is where the source gets, let's say, very provocative.
Provocative is a nice way of putting it. So the Cantillon effect, as it's normally understood, basically says when the Fed prints $1 trillion, they don't drop it from helicopters over poor neighborhoods.
No, they don't.
They inject it at the top. They give it to the big banks, who then lend it to hedge funds, private equity, and major corporations. The rich and the well-connected get the new money first. They go out and buy up assets like stocks and real estate before the prices rise. By the time that money trickles down to the working class in the form of wages, prices for everything have already gone up. It's a form of structural theft.
That is the standard, and I would say factually correct, definition of how it works mechanically. But the source attempts to reframe this. It asks us to look at it not as theft, but as functional bifurcation.
Okay, the word functional implies it serves a purpose. Please explain to me what purpose widening the wealth gap to historic levels could possibly serve. Because, to me it sounds a lot like elitist propaganda. Like, oh, the rich need the money first because they're just better at using it.
Well, in a purely cold, mechanical, economic sense, that is precisely the argument the source makes. It argues that the system is designed to concentrate capital into the hands of what it calls the industrious allocators.
The industrious allocators. So we're talking about your Elon Musks, your Jeff Bezoses, your Larry Pages, the tech titans.
Correct. The theory presented is that private enterprise, when sufficiently capitalized, drives what it calls higher-order missions far more efficiently and rapidly than any government bureaucracy ever could. If the government just kept that printed $1 trillion, it might get lost in red tape or spent on inefficient programs. But if it flows via the Cantillon effect to someone like Elon Musk...
He builds reusable rockets and puts a global satellite internet constellation in the sky.
Exactly. Or he revolutionizes the electric vehicle industry. The argument is that these massive, species-level technological leaps require immense concentrated pools of capital. You can't build SpaceX with a Kickstarter campaign. You need billions and billions of dollars. The Cantillon effect, in this controversial view, is the system's mechanism for directing resources to the most competent engines of technological growth.
So the system is rigged, but it's rigged with the intended outcome of pushing humanity forward, technologically speaking.
That is the Steelman argument for it, yes. It allows the government to play a minimal role in direct innovation while capital naturally flows through the financial system to those individuals and companies who can drive global growth most effectively. Now, whether you agree with the morality or the long-term consequences of that is a completely different story, but mechanically, that is how the leverage system fueled the incredible tech boom of the last few decades.
It's a very charitable interpretation. But okay, let's just accept the premise for a moment. Let's say this was a necessary phase for the last 50 years. We needed the growth, we needed the internet, we needed the abundance of cheap goods. But now, it feels like something is changing. The system is getting unstable. And this is where the source pivots from economics to, of all things, physics.
Yes, the thermodynamics of money. For me, reading the source, this was the real aha moment.
So let's unpack this phase change analogy. It compares the different states of money to the states of matter: solid, liquid, gas, and even plasma.
Right. It argues that a healthy economy has phases, just like water does. To understand it, let's visualize this. Picture a solid gold bar in your mind.
Got it. Heavy, dense.
Physically, it's a solid. It has extremely high density. It has integrity. It holds its shape over millennia. You can build a foundation on it. But solids are very hard to move. They have low velocity.
Now, if I want to move a ton of gold from New York to Tokyo, I need a forklift, a ship, a vault. There's a whole process.
Yeah, exactly. Now let's introduce fiat currency into this analogy. The source compares fiat to a gas or a vapor.
Vapor. That sounds about right for the value of the dollar these days.
Think about the physical properties of a gas. It expands to fill any container it's put in. That is exactly what debt does in our economy. It fills every corner, it creates volume, and allows for incredible speed. You can wire fiat money around the world instantly, but it has no density, it's flimsy, it has no shape of its own, and it dissipates its value, its energy, over time.
So for the last 50 years, since 1971, we've been living in a gaseous economic state, constantly expanding, filling every available space with credit, but losing density and value along the way.
Correct. But now the source says we have to look at Bitcoin, and it compares Bitcoin to plasma, or more simply, to high-pressure steam.
Steam is just hot water vapor, isn't it? How is that different?
Think about the energy difference. When water turns to steam inside an industrial engine, it carries immense directed power. It can move a locomotive. Plasma is an even more energetic state. So Bitcoin moves at the speed of light, like a vapor, like pure information. It has the velocity of the fiat system.
Okay, so it's fast,
But it has the 21 million unit cap, it has the density of the gold system, it has a crystalline, predictable structure, the blockchain, and the proof-of-work algorithm that is unchangeable and incorruptible. So the argument is that you get the best of both worlds. The absolute scarcity of a solid with the transactional velocity of a gas.
And the phase change that's happening now.
The source argues that we are currently in the middle of an exothermic phase change. Just as water turning to steam in an engine releases a huge amount of energy, the evaporation of value out of the old systems and into something like Bitcoin allows for high economic velocity without the dilution and decay of the fiat vapor.
So if the last 50 years was the world's economy turning into a gas expanding, leveraging up, getting less dense, what is happening right now?
We are seeing a crystallization. Society is beginning to reallocate its energy, its capital, from that gaseous expansionary state back toward a crystalline ordered state. The long breath out is finally finishing. The breath in is just beginning.
But wait a minute. If we go back to a solid or crystalline system, a value-based system, does that mean credit and lending just disappear? Do we lose the ability to borrow money? Because if we do, doesn't the entire economy just crash? We just spent 10 minutes talking about how we need leverage to build factories and innovate.
This is probably the most critical technical point in the entire deep dive, and the source addresses this directly with a concept it calls digital credit as anti-leverage.
Anti-leverage. That sounds like a complete contradiction in terms.
It sounds like it, but let's look at the mechanics of it. In the fiat system, we said that leverage is centrifugal.
Right, pushing outward. Your pizza dough analogy was perfect. It gets wider and thinner.
Exactly. The fiat system is designed to spin the dough wider and wider. It creates more money to chase the same goods. It dilutes the value at the center.
And in a Bitcoin-based system.
In a Bitcoin standard, the source argues credit becomes centripetal. It acts like a gravity well, pulling things inward.
How on earth does borrowing money create gravity? That doesn't make sense.
Because the base asset, the Bitcoin itself, is perfectly and mathematically scarce. You cannot print more to bail out bad loans. Therefore, to get a loan, you can't rely on trust or your credit score or the possibility of a government bailout. You must rely on hard, verifiable collateral.
Collateral, okay.
Specifically, what's known as over-collateralization. If you want to borrow $100,000 of liquidity, you might need to lock up $120,000 or even $150,000 worth of your Bitcoin in a transparent smart contract.
So I have to already have money in order to borrow money.
You have to have assets to borrow liquidity. And what this does is it fundamentally contracts risk in the system. If you take out that loan and the value of your collateral drops below a certain threshold, you are automatically and instantly liquidated. The system cleanses itself in real time.
So there are no zombie companies.
There are no zombie companies. In the fiat world, companies that don't actually make a profit can survive for years, even decades, because they can just keep borrowing cheap printed money. In a value-based world, the economic gravity is too strong. If you aren't efficient and productive, you lose your collateral. You die.
It sounds ruthless.
It is ruthless. But the source argues it is also incredibly stable. It prevents the formation of the massive system-threatening credit bubbles that characterize the late stages of the leverage system. The source describes this as increasing the velocity of the currency people can still borrow and spend without diluting the fundamental density of it.
So we are potentially moving from a world of forgiveness and expansion to a world of accountability and concentration.
That's what the source calls the fundamental societal upgrade. We are pivoting from the vapor of endlessly expanding credit back to the solid of verifiable scarcity. The argument is that you need both phases. One provides the chaotic energy for innovation, that's leverage, and the other preserves the fruit of that innovation for the long term, that's value.
It really feels like we're at the end of a very, very long party, and the house lights are just starting to come on.
It's the cleanup phase.
Mm-hmm.
And it might be messy.
So,
yeah.
What does this all mean for us? We've got about 5 minutes left here, and already it's practical. We've talked about equations, history, thermodynamics, but I'm looking at my 401k, and like everyone else listening, I'm wondering what on earth I'm supposed to do with this information.
Right. How do we apply this?
Exactly. So what's the end game here? Are we heading for a slow rebalancing of global financial flows, where assets like Bitcoin and gold just slowly eat up market share over a decade or two? Or are we heading for something more catastrophic, like a Minsky moment, a sudden sharp collapse of the debt bubble?
That is the trillion-dollar question, isn't it? The source implies a natural cycle, the breath in, which suggests a gradual rhythmic process. But history also teaches us that phase changes. Think of water flashing to steam, can be incredibly violent. They release a lot of energy. If the vapor of the fiat system collapses too quickly into the solid of a value system, that transition could be chaotic. We could see rapid hyperinflation in fiat terms while the value assets skyrocket.
So what does that mean for the small investor? The standard advice for the last 40 years has been the 60-40 portfolio. 60% stocks, 40% bonds. That has been the absolute bedrock of modern retirement planning.
And it worked beautifully in a leverage-based expansionary world where interest rates were generally falling. Bonds do well when rates fall. Stocks do well when money is cheap and plentiful. But in a value paradigm, bonds are essentially someone else's debt. If the currency itself is being debased, or if yields have to spike to account for credit risk, bonds can become what some people are calling return-free risk.
So is the answer to diversify differently? I'm seeing more and more people talking about a kind of 3-3-3-3-3-3-3 split or something similar.
It's a strategy that seems to align with this bifurcation thesis. For example, maybe it's 30% in hard commodities, gold, silver, maybe even energy and copper, the physical value of the real world.
Okay, tangible assets you can touch.
Then perhaps another 30% in the emerging digital value, Bitcoin primarily, and maybe some Ethereum if you view it as a kind of digital oil for the infrastructure of this new internet.
And the last third, what do we do with that?
Maybe 30% stays in a mix of broad equities and some bonds. Because even if the system is changing, productive companies, the industrious allocators, will still produce value. You don't want to bet entirely against human ingenuity. If companies are building robots and AI that make society more productive, you still want to own a piece of that production, regardless of what currency it's denominated in.
It's a hedge, really.
Yeah.
You're betting on the phase change happening, but you're keeping a foot in the current system just in case the transition is slower than we think.
Exactly. It's about survival and maintaining optionality in an uncertain world. But, I would love to hear what our listeners think. What exactly is the right path forward? Is the 60-40 portfolio really dead? Is there another model we should be looking at? Please share your thoughts in the comments. We really do read all of them.
Yes, please do. We want to know if you're on team value, team leverage, or if you're trying to build a bridge to straddle the great bifurcation.
And please remember, this is a community effort. The analysis in this deep dive is based on the source material provided, the bifurcation of global economics, and other publicly available information. But this story is still unfolding in real time. We invite you, our listeners, to share your own analysis and sources in the comments. We want to hear from you.
Absolutely. And we're always looking for collaborators to review our content. So if you're a finance expert or a crypto native with a sharp eye for detail, please don't hesitate to reach out.
As always, keep searching, keep the quest on.
I'm Satosha.
And I'm Satoshi.